Okay, so welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for October 14th, 2021. We'll follow our standard agenda, which we have outlined in the issue, which was number 1098. One small adjustment is I'll get Rich to go through CPC updates just before he has to jump off. So Rich, if you want to kick us off with that.
Sure. So as you may or may not know, there's the whoops, somebody just okay. Got disoriented there because someone copied.
Sorry about that.
You're on it. Great. So there's the Node.js certification and training scholarships that are available. I don't know how widely known this is, but the deadline's approaching soon. Link is in the issue tracker, but it's the you can search the internet for the OpenJS blog titled New Node.js Certification and Training Scholarship. But basically, for people who want to get Node certified and can't afford it, this is a way you can get some help. So deadline's coming soon, though, so get on that quickly, please. And get the word out if you know people who might benefit from this. The Node.js Community Committee has been retired, as hopefully everybody here knows. But if you don't know, now you do. And changes are still in progress. We're still, trying to figure out what to do with the admin repo and updating docs everywhere and figuring out governance stuff. Oh, community committee used to have to approve this. What do we do now? Stuff like that. Still working it out, but the community committee has been retired. And lastly, there's a charter change that I have proposed to simplify the automated process of removing people who are inactive from the TSC, because we are very bad about removing them intentionally. So we have an automated process, but the process is kind of broken. So I'm trying to fix it. There's an issue in the TSC repo. I think it's on the agenda today. It's 1097. It is overwhelmingly approved by TSC members, as far as I can tell, based on the +1s and the emoji reactions. CPC has to approve a charter change, though, the cross-project committee that I'm talking about right now. And their process involves the charter change has to stay open for 2 weeks to give CPC members a chance to review it and possibly object. I don't anticipate that happening. Everybody on the CPC who has weighed in so far is somewhere between very much in favor and extremely enthusiastic. So yeah, that's my CPC long-winded update. Thanks for putting up with my rambling.
Thank you. Any questions before we move on? If not, I don't have any board updates in terms of anything going on that front. As always, if you have anything that you think I should take to the board or whatever, let me know. We'll flip back to announcements. Rich did mention that the community committee has been retired, and we're shuffling around some of the governance to cover that, as well as working on how the existing teams and work groups end up getting integrated and documented. Any other announcements that people want to share?
Yep, we should probably announce that Node 17 will be released next Tuesday. The next few days should be picking up the last few commits that will land, and also trying to crowdsource notable changes. So I've just pasted a link for the changelog. So if anyone on the TSC has any suggestions for what to incorporate into the notable changes, please suggest them on there. And also we're working as usual with the OpenJS Foundation to put out the formal release announcement, and I'll paste a link to that into there too, for people to review. All of them work in progress as we're still finalizing the last few commits.
Does Node.js 16 get promoted to LTS this month as well, or does that happen later?
Next week. The following Tuesday.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's worth noting for sure too. I'm just going to note that in.
And I got to go, so thanks everybody. See you next week.
Okay, so that's good. Any other announcements before we move on to looking at the issues that were tagged for the agenda? If not, okay, let's move on then. So the first issue that was tagged was document considerations for inclusion in core. That one, I believe, Rich mentioned that he's, there's some discussion is going on in the issue itself. There's been some comments, and he's got the action to update those comments, but the progression, basically it's progressing to refine and incorporate those comments. Anything people want to touch on that one this week before we move on? If not, the next one on the agenda is doc, add initial list of technical priorities 40235. That's one where there has been some ongoing discussion. Still would be great if we had a few more people, making sure that they've reviewed it, make sure that, it aligns with what the TSC thinks is important as well. So just on the agenda for awareness, and, to give a spot if anybody has any questions or anything that they want to bring out outside of the GitHub issue itself. Okay, if not, we might as well move on to the next issue, which is replace OpenSSL 1.1.1 with OpenSSL 3.0.0. That one actually, since the agenda was created, the PR already landed, so the issue is closed. I did note nothing to discuss, although I've seen that there have been some issues reported. I know Targos, you were looking at some of those, and I thought maybe we could spend a minute or two talking about that. Does that make sense? I guess, Michael, if you're talking, you are on mute.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your question.
Sorry, I was just we were on the issue which was replacing OpenSSL 1.1.1 with OpenSSL 3. And I'd noted that the issue was already closed and landed, but I know that you had commented that there's been some issues seen. And I wondered if we should spend any time talking about that, or we think those will just work themselves out before the release.
I'm not sure if they are going to be resolved. I just saw a few issues in Canary in the gold mine that seem to be related to that, but I don't know actually.
Yeah, I think my quick read was that was related to OpenSSL by default doesn't enable some of the legacy, like older, weaker algorithms. And I know Dan is going to look at how we can, re-enable those, or like there's a command line option which you can enable. I think there should be something where you can re-enable the legacy provider that would provide those. But I'm wondering if we need to have like a contingency plan that says, if we do we want to stick with OpenSSL 3 regardless, or if we haven't got those resolved, or should we consider backing it out?
I'm probably not the right person to talk about that.
Okay, I'm just wondering, does anybody else have thoughts on that here?
I guess the question is, we don't know how widespread the problem is going to be. For the particular things that as Canary in the Gold Mine were flagging up, we think Webpack can specify an alternate hashing algorithm, which would be a workaround, but it will mean that anyone depending on the default for, I think Webpack 4, I think Webpack 5 has changed the default, but Webpack 4, I think defaults to MD4, which currently Node doesn't provide because we don't load the legacy crypto provider. So there is a sort of workaround which we could, I guess, put in the notable changes as a sort of, I guess it's a tricky balancing one because it is a Semver major, so some breakage is possible to be expected, but it's the extent to which that breakage occurs. I think it doesn't really do anyone any favors to stay on OpenSSL 1.1.1 for Node 17. If we hadn't actually put this into Node 17, we wouldn't have even found this. So,
right, like that's certainly the choice here is like there may be other gotchas which we may only find by having it in 17, and I think I'd personally rather have that in 17 than 18, right?
Yeah. So I know Dan's looking at. I guess one of the things we don't know yet is if providers are loadable in the way that we compile OpenSSL into Node. So we have traditionally statically linked OpenSSL into Node, but OpenSSL's re-architecture to use providers is all built around this idea that you could dynamically load providers at runtime, which kind of implies that you wouldn't be statically linked. So that's something we would possibly need to look at if the possibility of including those legacy providers is something we think we should be doing. It's almost also a security question as to
right,
how much do we want to support things that aren't default. And it's really about the sort of configuration, because, for example, one of the reasons we were going to OpenSSL 3 is the FIP support, but I mean, FIPS for a long time has disallowed certain algorithms. So
it has an even more restrictive set, yeah.
Exactly. So it's hard for the ecosystem in that really you should be querying for available algorithms and catering for them possibly not being there. For example, someone else could compile a version of Node and decide to exclude or include algorithms depending on what compile options you pass into OpenSSL, or even if you're using something other than OpenSSL that's compatible, it's not something you can really assume that you are going to have certain algorithms present in your runtime. So it's a bit of a tricky one, balancing how it should work with what is the ecosystem's expectations and how much breakage do we think we can tolerate, and whether it really is breakage or if it's no, if you update these things, then you'll be fine. But
right, okay. I guess the question is, would anybody? I think, like from what I can hear from what you're saying, Richard, is it's kind of like, yeah, it is a Semper Major. I know we try and minimize breakage, but like this is going to happen sometime, right? And so it's unless we think that it's going to be so bad that it doesn't make any sense, I think getting the feedback sooner than later makes sense to me. I don't know if I just wanted to see what other people think here as well. Just make sure we're all in sort of agreement that we should continue.
Just going to note that considering we only have like one working day before the release needs to be built and shipped, I don't think backing it out now is an option. Like picking up a couple of additional commits and refining the notable changes to inform people of the impact is much easier to do than to revert a large number, well, a very large commit, do some very intensive rebuilds, resitching. So I'd be concerned about backing it out. I don't think we can at this point.
Yeah, I guess what your point, like we would have to delay if we chose to do that, right? Which is another consideration, right?
That would be the consequence, yeah.
I mean,
I think it might also
go ahead.
It might also be difficult later, since the deadline for OpenSSL 1 is, I don't know, before the deadline for Node 16 and probably also before the deadline, the end of support for Node 17. We'll have to switch at some point, and the switch is probably going to be Semper Major, so breaking change. So if we can try to fix those problems before Node 18, that's probably the best we can do at this point.
Anybody else have any thoughts or? So it sounds like everybody's comfortable with, proceeding, although we know this may cause some issues in the ecosystem. We may want to include something that says, we know this is happening and we're looking at what possible mitigations there are when 17 goes out, since we're very close. That makes sense to everybody. Oh, I see the NPM test suite is breaking on it.
I think that was a similar issue. I think it's another module that's using a hashing algorithm. I think they're all caching, so it's a hashing algorithm for caching, and they've picked MD4 because it's fast.
Right. I guess, Miles, from the NPM side of things, do you have any input, take on that? You're on mute if you're talking.
He said he's
Miles.
stepping away for a second.
Ah, right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So I guess I'm not hearing any strong, like, we should change course. I just wanted to sort of bring that up and make sure we're all aware, because there may be some, I think we should almost be going out with a hey, we know this is happening and we're looking at what we can do, but we feel 17 is the better place to try it out than 18 can be the message. Because as Tobias mentioned, we have an end date for sure. For 18, it's gonna, like, we have no choice, because 18 will definitely be out. You're right about 16, 17. I think we've got 6 months. It's only 6 months, so it might squeeze under, but sounds like everybody's still, unless somebody wants to speak up, it sounds like we're like stay the course at this point. Okay, and then maybe we'll loop back to Miles just to see once he gets back. Let's move on to the next issue, which is rename default branch from master to main, which is 33.864. We've moved a few more issues, a few more repos over. There is an issue. There was actually the first problem reportable, which was on readable stream. And it was related to, there were some modules basically pointing to readable stream through Git directly to master, and GitHub wasn't redirecting, downloading the tar gzip. So we've opened an issue and are hoping that'll be resolved as well. But I just thought it was interesting to note we have had one issue here, but the only one that I've known so far. Any questions on that before we move on? The next one is migration of core modules to Primordials. That one I'm gonna have to open up, or somebody can jump in with an update on that.
So last week we heard Jordan and Bradley presenting their ideas, their arguments about what should be the course of action on Primordials. Basically, the bottom line of their presentation is yes for Primordials and yes for implementing those partially, attacking things on a case basis, mostly to do with bringing robustness to the core around the module loading and related areas, bringing integrity and robustness to that part of the code. So that's what I understood as the main proponents on that argument. Taking it forward, I'm not sure whether Ruben has other arguments to present, or it was presented in the last meeting itself. If there is a separate presentation is required from Ruben or Nikita's side, we can have that. Otherwise, TSC should go for consensus to see if we all are in agreement with what we heard in the last week. If there is no consensus, we should go for a voting. This is what I think we should be taking forward.
So there was definitely the argument of moving some of that code to the C++ layer, so that we do not have to use Primordials in the first place. And that might still be an option for some of the code. We did not really look at what code would have to change in case we only look at the loaders, because as you just said, and that's pretty much what they suggested. It is also going to be an issue about how fast things load or not. We had like a lot of optimizations and done so that we are able to load code fast in the beginning, like especially for cold boot. That's something that Matteo brought up last time as well. And we could just, I guess it's going to come down to a vote at some point, and we should just then outline all the different opportunities. But before we can do that, we should document what part we really consider necessary to be either moved to the C++ layer or using Primordials.
So is there a path to do that, or I guess if that's the key next step, how do we do it is my question.
Let's just give it a date until we should outline that. And anyone could just add possible voting options inside of the issue.
Okay, so Rish, is that something you know what to do, or on that front?
The issue is a public issue in the core repo, but I guess we are talking about a TSC voting here.
Right, I think it's so go ahead.
TSC voting generally we do in this forum, right? Or do we do it on a issue open in the TSC repo?
I think unless we have a particular concern, we often do it in just an open issue.
Okay.
You know, if we had here are the options, and then, you know, that's where we need to get to. I think Ruben was suggesting, you know, one of the options is, you know, limit the applicability to primordials or an equivalent to just, you know, A, B, C, and D, but we'd need to define what that A, B, C, and D is. And I think, Ruben, you were suggesting we could basically say, like, whoever wants to add something to that list needs to do so by date X, right?
Yes, exactly. I would say let's give it 2 weeks up until yeah, so 2 more TSC meetings up until that date.
Okay. I'll take an action on that.
Okay.
Issue.
So I'm going to say you will open issue in TSC repo with options to people will be given 2 weeks to add to paths they believe are important. And then we'll kick off the vote. We'll kick off the vote. Sounds good. We'll leave on the agenda. We can kind of discuss it too to see if there's questions on what's there in the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything more on that before we move on to the next issue? Okay, the next issue is number 1097, Adjust Charter Simplified Automated Removal Rules. I think this is already covered by Rich. You know, we've had many approvers just waiting on CPC approval. Okay, anything more on that one before we move on? Okay, so the next one is nominating Richard Lau. There's an issue there, and we've invited Richard as a guest this week. You know, I think there's equivalent to the, you know, that we've got lots of +1s. I'd have to go back and look at our governance if like we need more than this issue as the confirmation. But I think it seems like that's progressing well. So, and thanks, Richard, for joining this time and joining in the discussion. Anybody have anything else they'd like to say on that? If not, okay, let's move on to the next one, which is to be in core or not to be in core. This is number 1041. And I think we'd already talked about that. Rich already mentioned that one as well, that he's, I guess, well, it's related to 40338, I think, unless I'm reading that wrong. No, I think that is related. So the is progressing in the PR, progressing in PR. Discuss this week. So I don't think, unless somebody has something, I don't think there's too much to discuss on that one. Okay, so we're finished with that. Before we move on though, Miles, now that you're back, I just wanted to double check the discussion on OpenSSL. It was mentioned that there's like a test failure in NPM. I just wanted to make sure we had your input from the NPM perspective. It seems like from the our discussion, we believe the best path, of course, the best path forward is still to leave OpenSSL 3 because we're going to have to take that breaking change at some point, and it's better in 17 than 18. But when it was mentioned that one of the NPM test suites is failing, so I just thought I'd give you an opportunity to comment if you had any additional thoughts.
I was not aware that there were new failures related to OpenSSL at NPM. I was under the impression that there were like some internal tests based on snapshots that just didn't get updated properly that we needed to fix. Are there other test failures that seem to be related directly to OpenSSL? Yeah,
Miles. We noticed in Citium that it's not just NPM, there are some other modules, but there's OpenSSL has moved some of the less secure algorithms into a legacy provider that we are currently not loading in Node. So there seems to be a few modules out there that are using MD4 to create hashes for things like caches. Yeah. And at the moment, that algorithm is no longer available. So the tests that are using those are failing. That seems to be what we're seeing in Citium. So NPM is one of the Citium modules which is failing because of this. I don't know how far down the dependency tree it is, or whether it's a test only issue. But we've only noticed it recently because we've only recently merged the OpenSSL 3 PR into Node. So
yeah, and this will be on the main branch and then make its way to 17, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, it's 17. 17 gets cut next week.
I'm not super worried about it if we break stuff. Let's break stuff, and then people will open issues, and then we'll fix it. I mean, like, this is the only way we're going to find out the weird edge cases. And I guess if one of you could send me the Citium results, or if there is like any issues or anything that they could share with the NPM team, we could start doing our own evaluations internally. And like, to be honest, having it in 17 and having 17 published actually will make it easier for us to like do that work. Like, I can get people RCs and stuff, and we can work off of that. But in general, I don't think that this should be a blocker. Also, we do have precedent, and I'm not saying that this is what we should do, but if we have to, we can revert it after we cut 17 if we find that like these things could not be fixed, or we've made changes that aren't able to be dealt with. And I know, Beth, you were saying it's like a lot of work right now to revert it in time for like the release. So like, I'm not saying this lightly. I'm just more like, if we found that we burnt the world to the ground and like this is just not a path forward, then we could take the time that we need to after the 17 release to revert it properly. But that would definitely be like a nuclear option. So there's a lot of words to say. Go ahead.
Okay. No, yeah, it's just wanted to get, and your take on it helps to actually get things fixed is a nice comment in terms of, we want to make sure absolutely we get this fixed up sooner than later. So it's good to hear that helps in some ways. Okay, so let's move on then to the strategic initiatives. So I'll start with V8 currency, since I know Michael's already added something there. So I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, so it's just about the fact that V8 9.5 will be in Node 17. I personally will not have the time to to backport it to 16. I tried, and there were a lot of issues. So from my point of view, 16 will stay on V8 9.4 from now on. And I think that's also a good point to stop updating V8, because 16 will transition to LTS in 2 weeks.
That does make sense. Okay, let me just pull up the list of strategic initiatives then to see if we have anybody else to speak to any of the other ones. Antoine, anything on core promises this week?
Yeah, no updates. While the Redline Premises is getting into T17, but that's not, it's an old news. So yeah, no updates.
Sounds good. So I will say Redline.
I'll take this opportunity to say bye everyone, because I have to jump now. So see you next week.
Sounds good. I'm just looking at, that's all the people we have from the strategic initiative. So I think that takes us to the end of the agenda. If all the TSC members can stick around for a private session, that would be great. And everybody who's been watching, thank you for taking the time.